Hello, everyone. Kind of dark here, maybe not. Um, so, um, what I'm doing today is a little inking since I've done two or three, I think, brainstorming streams so far. Um, but I haven't really done any live streams showing my finished work. So, we are going to be working on a little book that have on the go with my character Miles Maarav. And just for context, I'll show some previous things. The book is called working title Miles Maarav's Pursuit of Happiness. So, and it's kind of a bit of a spoof also of kids books. The E is for, J is for, etc. So this is the E. He's eating lunch. He's dreaming that he's in Egypt being crowned emperor of the Elvises. So that's the kind of thing we're doing today. But sometimes it's also just vignettes from Miles's life. So, for example, this was G, grandma, where he's hanging out with his grandma, getting his ass whooped in Scrabble and chess, taking her grocery shopping, cleaning her gutters, taking out her trash, and watching her gamble. So that's kind of the style we're going for. And today's spread, I have not worked on this book in a while, but it is J. So J is for jury duty. And I don't know, well, this is a non-photo blue pencil underdrawing, so I don't know that it shows up all that much, but we're gonna ink it anyways. But here's the thing, he's stuck in jury duty, he's not happy about it. And Miles knows jujitsu, so he's daydreaming about flipping and body slamming the judge. Um, so let's get right into it with the left side. Now, when I do these, I'll also say I'm getting over a cold, so I'll try and not cough too much, but it's going to happen. So these kind of works. And by the way, my finger looks a little blue. I have Raynaud's. It's cold out. And what better time for one's fingers to turn blue than right when you're going to be having your hands on camera? Now, it's actually not cold in my house, but my fingers don't know that. My fingers like to live in tropical zones, I guess, so which is a problem because I live in Canada. Anyways, so I'll just sort of show. This is actually a little sculpture thingy I made of Miles's dad, Crazy Larry. It's a whole thing. Larry is kind of a used car tycoon over there in Mouston. But anyways, I something fell off camera. That's fine. I had made this little tray and wasn't sure. Well, what am I going to fit in there that's so small? And I realized, oh, it's perfect for pen nibs. So, anyways, we were going to be using a few different kinds. These are just the cheap ass speedball ones that you get at Michael's. I do find for this kind of work, I mean, sometimes I like these kind of ones that don't have well, they have a reservoir by like surface tension underneath, but um, this kind with the little brass thingy tends to trap ink above. So if you're doing a lot of line work, these are really good. These ones I like too. Sometimes I find it depends on the bottle of ink. This particular bottle, I'm just using Speedball Super Black. They don't make it like it used to be, or I don't know. I find it's more runny than it used to be when I used to buy this stuff years ago. 'Cause 20 years ago, I had a web comic called Zombie the Destroyer, and I did it the same way. And I seem to recall that being a thicker, denser ink. Now it's more watery. So I do find, I don't know, I feel like I constantly have to dip into with these, whereas these kind of hold it. and then the surface tension, so I don't know, I feel like I don't have to dip as much. Maybe that's just me, maybe my technique sucks, I don't know. And we'll probably end up with a few different, sizes going on. Just gonna move what fell over so I don't roll my chair over onto it. And I do have off to the side, this is the same scratch paper that I've been using throughout this project. Um, so actually we'll start with a little scribbling because I find I never know when I take the lid off of this, and I have shaken it up a little bit. Got saran wrap under because sometimes I find otherwise, it kind of goobers and then dries around, and then I can't get the lid off the next time. Oh, we got some random stuff, dried bits. I've got some paper towel just over there. I've got some little yogurt containers with water and a bigger sour cream container reservoir of water as well. Um, so we will get going with that. I think I've got this camera as bright as it will go. Um, I don't know if that makes much difference or not, but let's see what the ink is like today. Well, it's not too bad, actually. Some days I put it on there and I mean, I think a couple of these were actually straight out of the bottle where they look really gray. I think one or two of them I actually did water down, but I always like to do a test. It's like, what's it gonna be like today? Anyways, I should probably grab one of these paper towels to have close at hand. And we're gonna start in the top left corner and work down. It would be awesome if I got both of these done tonight, but we'll see. Some of these pages take half an hour to ink, and some of them take like an hour. Well, I wouldn't say an hour and a half, but some of them sure take a while. So, and we'll probably be changing nibs a couple times. Some people will, once they've got their blue line down, they'll kind of then go over. In fact, traditionally, you're supposed to do this. I'm lazy and whatnot. But some people will do what they call the penciling stage. Oh, sorry. Um, where they will then take like a thin pencil and go over the lines. So um, I think that was well, I know, like, back in the day, that's how, like, your Marvel comics and all that were all made in that manner, but then also, one of the reasons they did that was that they would, have multiple artists working on a page, so the guy who actually drew, like well, I mean, technically, they all draw it, but, the guy who did the first round of drawing, like, it set the image, um he would be working in, like, the blue and then, penciler, because he's kinda tracing, be kind of a little bit not as senior perhaps, but and some guys specialized where however long they'd been in the business, that was like, they were awesome with pencils or they were awesome with the raw drawing, but they were kinda messy, and other guys who were really good with the ink, and it used to be more of, division of labor. I think I think not that there's as many, professional comic artists. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm talking out my ass, but compared to the golden age, I think there's less guys working, in that field, and digital workflow has kind of, negated a bunch, but, the color was done separately, the original art, the pencils, the inking, be like 4 different guys. Um, pardon me. And whereas, obviously I am me, myself, and I am not. So, anyways, my point is I'm skipping the pencil thing because I'm going straight from blue lines to inking. Also, I think sometimes they do the pencil on this is Bristol board. So they would do um the penciling there, and then they would trace the inking would be done on vellum, which is kinda like really thick tracing paper, right? So, um, and actually about 20 years ago, 19 anyways, I took a couple classes, through continuing studies at Emily Carr in Vancouver, and, I think the class is called the Contemporary Comic at the time. I remember his face, I don't remember his name, but his he had a comic book, like an underground alternative comic book called, Drippy Town, I think was the name of it. So he taught us, like, the traditional, um, and so I have actually done the, like, the vellum and the whole 9 yards, but, I don't do that on my own. Because to me, it's a little I get it when you're handing things off, but because I'm not, it's like, well, I'm just gonna ink on the same, and also because non-photo blue, if you scan when this is all done and you scan on, any scanner, um, and you scan it in black and white, it will, knock out that, blue will not be there when you're done. So seems to me like I just saved myself a step by skipping the pencils. It's not that I'm lazy, I swear, it's that I'm efficient. Anyways, with the judge's sign, I'm gonna outline it, but I will do it in a different pen. Now, as this is drying, it to my eye, it looks more charcoal than super black. Um, but that's kind of a ongoing annoyance for me. Like I said, what did I say at the beginning? Speedball, I don't think it's quite like it used to be back in the day. So, and where it's thicker, it will go completely black, but, you know, I think I have actually pulled out my old, Zombie the Destroyer, Bristol boards and kinda looking like, "Yeah, this does not look quite the same." But, on the other hand, the internet doesn't when I searched before, it doesn't seem to know what I'm talking about changing formula or whatever, so maybe it's me, maybe it's. I have seen online, though, there were some people with a different brand recommendation, which I may try at some point. I mean, I have the Liquitex acrylic ink. I'm not using it today, though, and, um this is pearlescent black, okay, never mind, good to know good, I'm glad I noticed that, the Dollar Rowney FW. I have a whole bin of different colored Dollar Rowney inks I use, like, a couple years ago, I did for Vlogmas, I did, um, colored ink drawings of my different characters, and, I do like that stuff. But I'd have to run some tests in terms of using it for this sort of thing. Um, and there was a different brand as well that, I think I actually may have a bottle of that they had at Opus. Um, Now, before I get too far in, because I don't wanna go back over an area and risk smudging it, I am gonna do his sign before I come back and do, his podium, but we'll do some of the other details over here. Basically, I want to run out the ink that I just dipped into. And that way. It's kind of fun to look up pictures of, different courtrooms and different areas and sort of see the wood paneling and how it's different in different areas. Uh, the only time I think I've only been in a courtroom twice in my life, thank God, knock on wood. Um, once was challenging a ticket I'd gotten, which it was actually I was making a left turn and I was in as far as I'm concerned, I had the right of way because when I started making the turn, there was no one there, and then suddenly got hit, right basically the back passenger side corner, like, actually past my wheel. Um, but what was there was a strip mall there, and one of the driveways to the parking lot wasn't that far there, so I still think to this day the guy who hit me whipped out of that, um whipped out of that strip mall and either thought I would clear beforehand or I don't know what he thought because if he didn't think I was going to clear, then he obviously thought he was gonna hit me and that would be fine, I don't know. Um, he had relatives in the car with him, like, it wasn't a high speed impact, nobody got hurt, but then the relatives called the cops and, like, they screamed at the cop until the cop gave me a ticket for an improper lane change or improper left turn or something. Um, anyways, so I did, challenge that ticket, and I did win. The cop didn't show up, so the judge threw it out. Um, anyways, that was God, it would've been like I think it was like 22 or something? A long, long time ago, but, it was in, Richmond, BC, and the courtroom there is a kind of modernist. I think it did have a little bit of paneling, but not too much, and the only other time I've, um, been in a courtroom was one time I got called up for jury duty, so I spent, 3 hours sitting in the peanut gallery at the back waiting for my name to get called. Then I walk up, the, prosecutor took a look. It was summertime, so I was wearing a short sleeve T-shirt. The prosecutor looked at my tattoos and kind of made this face, and then, um, they get to each, challenge a certain number of jurors, I guess. So, and they don't have to give a reason why, and, so I got challenged, and I was like, "Huh? What?" It's like, "Okay, you can go home, Ms. Draculea." Like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you, your honor." But that was the law courts in downtown Vancouver, and, like, it was all wood, but it wasn't, like, paneling, it was kinda those ones look kinda weird if you ask me. I guess it was, like, they built that part in, like, the '60s or whatnot, so they wanted it to look official or classy or something with wood paneling, but it was just, like, straight boards. Um Or they may have done that thing actually, why not except I've already inked. Never mind. I was gonna say, the thing where it's like vertical it's like the overpriced version of shiplap, but vertically, where it's just like thin boards for no apparent reason when you could just put in wide panels. Anyways, um, so, I think I'm getting close to having to dip again, which is when I'm gonna actually wash this brush. When I say brush, it's not a brush, it's a nib. Wash this nib out. Um, so I'm gonna do that right now. Sorry for the sniffling. It's not as bad as it was when I did my Tuesday, brainstorming live stream. That was like, oh, I actually took my mic off. I could barely talk at that point because still a little bit scratchy throated, much worse than I am now. Um, yeah, you can get away with. something in a minute here. I need my stupidly thin nibs. I'll set those two aside for later. Well, we'll use this one. It doesn't have a reservoir, but it's not quite like if I go down to like the crow quill ones that are the really tiny points, I just find like they work, but they scratch on the paper in a way that kind of makes my skin crawl. I don't know, that sounds weird, but they get a little infuriating. So see what I said about having to dip more often. Yeah. I was thinking is why don't we give them some of that? Because otherwise this is just gonna be blank, right? So, but then I need this to do the panel lines, and then I'll draw in wood grain afterwards with this guy. See, I think if memory serves, this is the kind of paneling that was in the courtroom where I showed up for jury duty. I actually didn't have jury duty as it happened, but you know, where it's kind of almost looks like if they put 2x4s on the narrow side. A water break. I will in the end go over these two with one of the fatter nibs to kind of give some shadow and make things poke out a bit more. Make sure I don't accidentally nudge that bottle. It will suck if I did. Our little thought bubbles going into Miles's head for what he's going to be plotting next. But there we go. I do try to at least kind of get the worst of the ink off before switching nibs. I guess, well, yeah, I guess you could kind of have nibs soaking or have I do have pen cleaner. I don't have it on the desk with me, but yeah. At the end, I'll like put it under running water and actually try and get the um, paper towel up and under the little brass bit. So now I'm gonna go and put some, kind of stereotypical kind of swirling wood grain kind of thingies in there. But this is the sort of thing that takes forever. So probably we're just gonna do the left side today. Now the finished size of the book, this is about 20% bigger, so it'll end up being about like that, I think. Maybe it's more than that. I thought it was more like what is it, A5 or something? Um, like 5.5 by 8.5 or something like that. So this will shrink, and some of this then will not really print properly, but I guess we find out at the time. Or it'll at the very least kind of create a gray tone because of how it goes. So I think traditionally you're supposed to draw it basically, I guess it would be like 400%, but basically twice as tall and twice as wide. Um, for me to do that, depending on the size of the book, I would have to invest in a tabloid sized scanner, which is something I've been considering for a few years, but I'm not sure I can justify it at this point. They're about $600, which I mean, you're going to do a lot of books. It can be worth it. Um, but the idea is at least as long as you do draw a little bit, taller, a little bit bigger, you can shrink it down so it's not that bad. But anyways, the reason why you do that is it does tighten up your artwork when it's reduced. So, of course, back in the day, like Marvel and those guys would have used like drum scanners, and I think that's the way it was. You scanned the large artworks back in the day. I mean, you always have the option if you did want to draw like way bigger, where you could scan it in parts. So, if you were aiming for a like a letter sized book or like an 8 by 10 size book or something like that, that you would draw it tabloid sized, and then you just kind of put on the scanner and do one a quarter, each time, but then you have to stitch it together in Photoshop, and that has its own issues. Um, the other way that people would do it is way that we learned at that Emily Carr class is dude who taught the class had the math figured out, so he told us what size to draw and whatnot, and then he actually used old Xerox machines because their bed was big enough that you could put something on, and then you would tell it to photocopy it at like, I don't know, 52% or whatever. And then that would spit out a photocopy that was already pre-shrunk, and then you would scan that. So there's different ways to do it. Of course, nowadays a lot of people work digitally, so it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't make it whatever pixel dimensions and worry about that later. And I mean, I do my main comic project, Noah's Archipelago, is a digital. Um, Currently being done in Procreate, although I'm planning to move over to work in Clip Studio Pro at some point. Um, and when I say some point, I mean like it's on my to-do list for February. Start watching some tutorials and get that all figured out. Um, but yeah, I do like working old fashioned like this. It does have a look that I'm sure you probably could replicate a lot of it digitally, but it's all so much harder to get it to look right digitally if you're going for like a traditional comics look. Um, or, you can just do it the traditional way with a dip pen and scan it. Actually isn't taking as long as I feared. Think for this, I'm gonna pretend like the green is going this way. It's time to go back and do the door. Yeah, we do the work this way again. So we're gonna wash out that. Actually, what am I doing? I can just use the same thing. Anyways, never mind. Um, Excuse me again. Tell you one thing for sure, when I get to W, it's not gonna be W is for wood paneling. Yeah. The wood paneling will continue until morale improves. So Miles is going to end up being the last individual we draw, actually. We'll do the other jurors first because of where they're sitting. But there, we're done the wood paneling for now. Let's add some shadows. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go smaller for their faces because this is just like even the judge that's kind of a little too big for um, his features. I'll probably refine that in Photoshop later, but um, do want to give a decent kind of a shadow outline of each head, basically. Zoe is actually, I think I have a slightly bigger version. I think the tip's probably the exact same. But I do think this one gives a slightly thicker line than what I used for all the wood texture. So let's have a look-see at that. Yeah, slightly. That's gonna have to be fixed in Photoshop. Kinda messed up her face, but okay. And we gotta switch nibs again because I do kinda need that line of the jury box to push against, so to speak. Sometimes the nib does not wanna go in. Oh, well. There's probably some dried ink buried in there, in the groove of the tip. Now, these are mice. They do have tails. They're mice men. But I don't really feel like drawing a bunch of tails. Usually, if I just have Ricky or Miles, the tail is up and you can see it, but I kind of don't want to do that for here. Um, so we'll assume they're all sitting in chairs and the tails are kind of down through off the side. Don't know if that picked up in my mic, but my iCal thinks it's time for me to do some painting. Well, I'm doing Something else that's artsy right now. Now we come to Miles, finally. Here, so now we've got our jury, and that means, unfortunately, we have more wood paneling. But I'm gonna draw in the panels first. They'll kind of match the judges' bench, podium, whatever. Just kind of use the get rid of the excess ink over here in the carpet. Oops. That wasn't supposed to happen. Once it does, though, it's a little bit late to mop it up. Okay, first of all, I'm a little bit bothered by the kind of hand push plate or whatever you want to call it on the door being so stark. I think that looks clearly enough that it's not wood, but because that would be brass or something, and it would have a certain amount of sheen, but not the equivalent to being, stark white. Guy's shirt's a little bit crumpled. So's her sweater. Some more wood texture. Yay. I complain, but I did it to myself. Alright. All right, down to the prosecutor's desk. I'm assuming it's prosecutor and the defense would be over there. I don't know. I'm just going by what it was the one time I was there for jury selection. Give him a little bit of hair up top. Still. And now more wood grain. Yay! We got to finish off the desk and then we're done. But I think I will do the wood grain with the slightly bigger tip because this is so much closer to us. Kind of like that was bigger than that. And I think to finish it off, I will take a bigger nib and just like make some outlines a little heavier. But suppose they should have papers or laptops or whatever in front of them, but whatever. Closing in on an hour and a half on this page. And I didn't even talk all that much. Although I also didn't get started right away at the beginning of the stream because I was explaining a bit about characters and stuff. So let's get some fatter outlines here. Whoops. Note for myself for Photoshop. The judge's chair also needs a little bit of emphasis. I'm actually inclined to make the carpet a fair bit darker. Maybe not all the way, but definitely out past there. Do I want to just make... I might actually, I think I'm going to make the carpet entirely black, or mostly black, because right now we kind of have a bit of a samey kind of tone, which is the case in a lot of these courtrooms where they're all kind of the same wood and all that sort of stuff, but it's harder to make that work in a drawing, I think. Yeah, that's already making it pop a lot better. On that note, I'm kind of gonna darken it behind here in the jury box as well. Yeah, even if I kind of just darken it in general, without going full black, I think it's helping. Oh, yeah, we'll put a little bit of a shadow under that because they're usually like 3D carved sort of pieces, right? So, all right. I think we're going to call this spread done. Darken up that for whoever's sitting next to Miles. We don't really see them. So I'm going to skip on doing the right side on stream, at least not in this stream. Gonna do some more inking next Friday night. Obviously, there's places I'm gonna kind of zoom in, I think, and talk about some of what's going on here. Um, and put the cap on before I risk knocking it over. So, just got a document camera here, so I can kind of zoom in. So, up top, I could put more 3D-ish detailing there, but I guess it would depend on whether um, the little seal is like a 3D carved or whether it's like a big rondelle that's been painted. Um, but we got a ton. Is that in focus? Okay, I guess I can't go down too far else it gets out of focus, but um, got a ton of wood paneling in the back. The judge's chambers, that nice thick door with a different little rondelle on top. He is the Honorable Jackson presiding. Um, well, we've got some good shadows and whatnot. And then in the jury box, this is Myles. Or it would be pushing it to call him a hero, but he's the protagonist. He's the main character of this little project. Anyways, he looks pissed off. More wood paneling, kind of darkened up the around there, and then we've got the prosecutors here. Put that up a little higher. We can almost get it all in. But yeah, so then the other half of this basically just goes into Miles's thought bubble. I don't know how much that picks up on camera, not very much. But basically, he's daydreaming about flipping the judge on his ass. So And Myles, kind of rather be just about anywhere other than jury duty. So that's going to be it for today's stream. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope there weren't too many technical issues, but at least I can sort of monitor with this setup and sort of see that, yes, my mic is on and my camera's on and whatnot. Um, we leave the rest up to YouTube. So next stream is going to be Tuesday at 6 p.m. I'm doing brainstorming for Miles's cousin's boyfriend, Ricky B, the rock and roll rat. And the little plot line where Ricky and Ursula, the daughter of another cartoon character of mine, are talking about going looking for the cartoon universe's version of Chuck E. Cheese, and that would be Cheesy Rats. So I've been doing a few Tuesday night brainstorming. I think that's going to end up being like its own graphic novel or something. But and then there's this little book, which is excuse me, I'm sorry. As I said at the beginning, I'm getting over a cold. Um, the book working title is Miles Maarav's Pursuit of Happiness. So we're kind of going through the alphabet with different aspects of Miles's life and complaints and stuff like that. What he'd rather be doing. So we're kind of chipping away at this. I've got another graphic novel I'm working on called Ricky B Goes to Sea, which is back to Ricky. And that one's in progress. So next week, actually, I think what we're going to ink next Friday is some Noah stuff because I'm almost done my first anthology of um, the Noah's Archipelago webcomics. But I want to add a few black and white line drawings, sort of like this, to scatter throughout the book. So maybe we'll do a couple of those next Friday, and then we'll maybe work on the week after, maybe work on Ricky B. Rat a bit, and then back to Myles. So whether we'll do the right side of the J spread or we'll have moved on by then, I don't know. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, the whole routine here on YouTube. And catch you next time. Bye for now.